Podiatric Medical Examiners Advisory Board meeting. It is Monday, January 29th, and it's 10 o'clock on this iPad. So we're going to get cracking. At first, I'll do a call to order. A roll call. Start there. You want to start, Dr. Lunsford?
Dr. Lunsford.
Joe Martin.
Leslie Campbell.
Travis Motley.
Renee Peach.
Brian Carpenter.
All right, we have a quorum present. We'll start with, Colleen, do you want to hit the overview of training for new board members on agenda item C?
Good morning, board members. Colleen Tran, Assistant General Counsel. So I understand everybody has already done the required training. So I'm here if you would like for me to do a refresher on all three. I'm more than capable, but if not, I'm here for questions if you have them, and we can move forward.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Colleen regarding either the Open Meetings Act, the Public Information Act, or the Administrative Procedures Act? Okay, that was easy.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Colleen. Agenda item D is public comment. I will ask if we can limit most comments to about 3 minutes. Certainly, we can go longer than that if need be, but that'll be the general guideline. And I do have a public comment form from Mr. Hanna. If you would like to start, Mr. Hanna.
Thank you, sir.
Good to see you.
Thank you. And Presiding Officer Motley and Board, my name is Mark Hanna. I represent the Texas Podiatric Medical Association. I have reduced my comments to writing, so I'll be very brief. The purpose of appearing before you today is to tell you that on behalf of the Texas Podiatric Medical Association, we believe strongly that the answer to frequently asked question number 9 on the TDLR website that relates to practice by podiatry, and we've given staff copies of this correspondence. We believe strongly that it's accurate as it relates to physician assistants. Clearly, a DPM cannot supervise or delegate medical acts to a PA. That may only be done by an MD or a DO. However, if you look at the Nursing Practice Act, and that's quoted on number 1 on page 2, it is very clear that the Texas Nursing Practice Act provides that professional nursing means, in part, the administration of a medication or treatment as ordered by a physician, podiatrist, or dentist. And more importantly in that section, nurse is defined as a person required to be licensed under this chapter. And that chapter is the Nursing Practice Act. So clearly, as used in that section, the term nurse includes an advanced practice registered nurse. So there is nothing that's unclear under the Nurse Practice Act. So based upon that and the points made in the remainder of the correspondence, we respectfully request that the advisory committee and ultimately TDLR revise this answer to frequently asked question number 9 so as to clearly reflect that a DPM may employ an advanced practice nurse and may delegate, either verbally or by order, the administration of medication and the performance of podiatric medical acts. Right now, that frequently asked question is an impediment to doctors of podiatric medicine from hiring an advanced practice nurse. Clearly, he or she can't delegate prescriptive authority, and we would want the FAQ to make that clear. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to respond.
So this is just clarification for me. So advanced practice registered nurse is different or the same than a certified nurse practitioner?
They're synonymous.
They're the same.
They're just different terms for exactly the same person.
Okay, so certified nurse practitioners in my world see my kids without the doctor being around, treat, prescribe medication and all of that under
Dr.
the
Peach.
license of the medical doctor or pediatrician. So you're saying that in podiatry we should be allowed to have that certified nurse practitioner treat our patients, prescribe medication under our license?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No, ma'am. An advanced practice nurse has a scope
Dr.
of
Peach.
practice pursuant
Mr.
to
Hanna?
his...
Sorry. Just for this, because of our public comment period, we can't really engage, so if you just had a specific question for clarification, but a debate back and forth, if you want to put the question on a future agenda for actual, like, discussion and stuff like that, we can do in our last agenda item for recommendation for a future, but just back and forth debate at this point, unless it's just for clarification, we can't do that
I would
at this
ask
point.
clarification. Thank you for clarifying, Mr. Hanna.
Is it okay if I clarify, just so somebody's going to have a step? I think it's really important.
I think maybe in summary that a licensed independent practitioner is recommended through your public comment that be considered as part of an employment arrangement with a podiatrist
Yes.
as a licensed independent practitioner, such as a certified nurse practitioner.
Right.
Okay,
Versus just an RN.
right.
Yeah, that was mine.
That was a clarification.
Well, thank you
versus-
for my comments, and I'll subsequently respond in writing to that issue via correspondence to the committee.
Mark, I got one question for you. You're not including the PA in that. This is
Yes.
just advanced nurse practitioner.
Absolutely correct. And of course, as I tried to make it clear, probably wasn't as clear as I should have been, the advanced practice nurse has his or her own scope of practice, independently of a DPM or a physician, MDDO. That person has their own scope of practice, and they can perform certain nursing acts independently or in connection working with an MDDO or dentist or podiatrist. Prescriptive authority is off the table when working with DPM. That is only allowed when working under delegation with a physician. Also, I think that's enough.
Yeah, I think you've made that clear.
Okay.
And certainly food for thought as we move forward for recommendations for our next agenda items and future board meetings.
Yes, and in the future, I won't respond to questions, Ms. Tran.
I won't ask them.
We won't ask or
You
respond.
can ask the question.
She
it's
just baited you, Mark, so don't worry about it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else here for public comment? No one else? Okay. That's agenda item D. Agenda item E is staff reports, licensing division.
Good morning, advisory board members, Dr. Motley. My name is Leonard Rivas. I'm the licensing manager for the Medical and Health Professions Group. In your packet, you received information and overview regarding the licensing division. I will go over a few things that the licensing division does. The licensing division reviews applications and issue licenses to qualified individual and businesses. The agency's 39 programs include 207 unique license types for over 750,000 licensees. The licensing division evaluates applications, criminal history, required education and credentials, experience and employment history, and insurance, bonds, and net worths. What you can expect from the licensing division staff report: new licenses issued, renewal licenses issued, online renewals, and the total license population. That's an overview of what the licensing division does. Do you have any questions for me about the licensing division?
Any questions from Mr. Rivas? Okay, thank you, Mr. Rivas.
Okay, I'm going to go over the licensing report.
Perfect.
This is September through November.
Okay,
We issued one new Doctor of Podiatric Medicine license. We renewed 1,072 licenses, and the total population is 1,137. For the non-certified podiatric technician, we issued 10 new licenses. We renewed one, and the total population is 448. We have 28 hyperbaric oxygen certificates and 2 nitrous oxide registrations. That concludes the licensing division report. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Rivas?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Can you review with me the renewing process for a license for a podiatric medical radiology technician?
So we mail out a renewal notice. The renewal notice comes back in, and there is not a fee for that at this time. So then we issue the certificate and send it out.
And is that for a license that's not active, or someone that's had training before and it's not active? Or?
I'm not understanding your question, sorry.
I wasn't aware that there was a renewal process for that license,
For which license, sir?
for the podiatric medical radiology technician.
There is a renewal for that license. I guess it's a renewal certification.
Okay. So they've gone through the process again to be certified again?
Correct. Yes, sir.
They've had the training before, and then they've been gone through the process again.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a quick one, just because
Sure.
we're still getting the lay of the land here. Is
Okay.
there a procedural difference on your end in your position if we were to renew licenses annually or every other year? Is that a flip of a switch? Is it a ton of heavy lifting to change that, or?
That would involve some programming.
Yeah, just programming. This is Brian Francis. Dr. Motley, it's not heavy lifting to do that. What we have discovered, though, when you go from a 1-year license renewal to a 2-year license renewal, that some people forget. And that's really the biggest challenge. When we first arrived here back in '99, one of our programs had a 3-year license period, and we moved it to 1 year for the simple reason that we wanted to have a better handle on the funding and being able to plan our budget a little bit better. But we've been able to do that well with 2-year licenses. I don't know if that's something the industry would be interested in.
Well, it's a interest that's been expressed just because it's more common every other year. But certainly then we get to lean on some of the expertise if you do 750,000 licenses.
Right.
And growing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty
Actually, I
sure
think we're around
the
about
guy who knows more just
780,000,
answered my
so.
question, so that makes it easy for us. Okay, great. I have no further questions. Anyone else for Mr. Rivas?
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you very
Good
much.
job, Leonard. Thank you.
That was E1 Licensing Division. E2 is Customer Service Division.
Good morning, Chairman and board members. Thank you for your service. It's great to meet you today. I am Trey Seals, the Director of our Customer Service Division, and I'm here to give you a quick overview of what we do for the agency. Of the 39 statutes, we respond to contacts for all of the statutes and programs. We have a team of 50 hardworking, heartful CSRs, is what we customer service representatives, who respond to our phone calls, our emails, our social media questions, our walk-ins, and that translated to about 500,000 contacts last year. So, with 50 folks. So that works out to about 2,000 calls or contacts, 2,000 calls per day right now, and in addition to emails. So approximately 200 contacts per hour. So just to give you just a taste of how busy we are, and the work that we do is really important and allows the other areas within the agency to do the work that they do. So primarily what we are doing when we're answering those responses is we're answering questions about the application process. It could be that the customer doesn't understand a particular point that needs to be clarified. And we do the surface or the first several steps into the process, but if it gets really technical, we then will refer that to a subject matter expert in our compliance section or our licensing division or education division as it is required. We answer a lot of guidance type questions. We communicate information internally to other divisions within the agency as far as business intelligence, hey, we're noticing on our website that if we updated this language or this form, we're hearing this question repeatedly. So we try to be a resource for the agency as well to do the best we can with, our goal is to reduce customer effort. That's one of our mottos. It's our, one of our mantras. And we believe in innovation and change, and we do our best to continually look at our processes and, okay, this isn't working. What's next? What can we try next until we get it right? And so while this program, as you can see in your report, the number of contacts is not as high as some of the others, we do treat those calls with as much importance as every other contact that we receive. So, but the majority of those calls are things that we probably aren't going to get too detailed involved in unless it's a renewal. We could be, they need help with they need help with the login or a renewal form, and so it's basic types of questions for this particular program. But we do, I just wanted to give you an overview of the kind of volume that we receive and the kind of work we're doing. I'm happy to entertain any questions if you have them.
I got one quick one. So
Sure.
you started with looking at this, about 10 calls a day from podiatry, and you're down to 5. Is it just people learning what TDLR is and learning how to use the online renewal process, or?
That is my suspicion. I would need to do a little more digging to actually figure that. Also, the holidays and certain other things do affect call volumes, but we're busy again now, so things have picked up again.
Dr. Carpenter, I'll add this. As we all know, the podiatry team before was extremely hard working. It was 4 folks. And what we've discovered when we first came to TDLR back in 1999, that there were like 20 to 30% of our calls was just a person calling back. And so even if they're averaging 10 calls a day, it may have been just a person trying to get through or get the answer in. And so sometimes that reduction is not a reflection of fewer people are calling. It's just maybe they're getting in and sooner. But it wasn't because of lack of effort before, but I think that may be a contributing factor.
Yeah, I think probably, hopefully it's some learning, like Dr. Carpenter was talking about. Personally, I'm not a big consumer of social media, but I do have a Twitter feed, and so now when I get the agenda and all that, it is perfect, fits me fine if it's a lot of people I talk to. Fine, and some other things I think that, from all the panic as I set through sunset and the transition, this dire, our boat is sinking panic, it ensued with a whopping 267 calls. So out of all the licensees, and not counting callbacks, it was only that many people. And I tell you that just to tell you this, that also in September was when y'all came up and had the booth at the TPMA meeting in Frisco, and I think that went a long way too, and just communication, that got rid of the fear of the unknown. And so fantastic. That's if you've got those call volumes down to that, it sounds like you have a lot of well-informed licensees to me. Hopefully that's the case.
I hope so, yeah.
Okay. All right. Anything else for Mr. Seals? Okay. Thank you very much.
Very nice to meet you.
That was agenda item E2. Next is E3, the Enforcement Division.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, board members. I'm Christina Kaiser, the Director of the Enforcement Division here at TDLR. In your materials for our staff report, you have some introductory information that basically describes the Enforcement Division and gives you a little bit of information about our processes and our sources of complaints. I'd like to give you a skimming sketch of that. I'm going to try to not go as much in depth as I did at the training summit that we had a few months ago. So as our name suggests, enforcement, we are the division that's responsible for investigating and resolving complaints that are filed against practitioners in the different industries and occupations and professions that we regulate. Our division consists primarily of investigators, prosecuting attorneys, and legal assistants. And those people are organized into units within the Enforcement Division that essentially mirrors the life cycle of a complaint as it moves through our process. The intake section is one of those groups. Intake is the first group that will receive a complaint when it comes in the door. They substantiate our jurisdiction and determine if the complaint presents enough information to justify opening a case for investigation. If those two tests are satisfied, then a case is opened and assigned to an investigator. And the investigators in our world are neutral finders of fact. They gather the facts and put together a written report that is then turned over to a prosecuting attorney. Part of what the investigators do when it's needed, they always will, of course, interview the complaining party, interview the respondent, which is the person the case was filed against, interview any other witnesses with relevant knowledge. They will gather documents or other types of physical evidence if that's required. In some of our programs, they will make an on-scene investigation. They will actually go and observe perhaps a job or a facility, depending on what was complained of. They will also, when needed, consult with professional experts to help us develop the evidence relating to standard of care type issues. But at the end of the day, the investigator is essentially a finder of fact. So they will prepare a written report, pass it on to the prosecutor. And then another fundamental of our world is that in each case, it is the prosecutor who makes the ultimate decision of what sort of enforcement action we're going to proceed with. If the evidence reflects violation, we can pursue formal enforcement action seeking penalties or license sanctions upon the person or other remedies that are available to us under the law. In a lot of cases, actually in the majority of cases, cases are resolved informally. Sometimes the case is resolved informally because there's not enough evidence to prove a violation, so that's an easy one. But there are some instances, even when the evidence does reflect a violation, that we're still going to close that case informally rather than seeking enforcement action. Sometimes the respondent will take appropriate actions to put the complainant back in a good place, to make the consumer whole, so to speak. That's one example of when we will close the cases informally. Other types of violations, perhaps the less serious types of violations, can sometimes be remedied, on the spot. And when those are remedied, and depending on the history, of course, the enforcement history of the person, that's another candidate for an informal closing. One of the things that we try to bear in mind always is that our prosecutors and all of our enforcement resources are scarce and very valuable resources of the state. And so every case is not treated with an equal level of priority. All cases are definitely investigated, but not everything is going to warrant cranking up the full prosecutorial resources of the state and marching down that road. So within that structure, I can tell you that our cases typically come from 3 sources, and the third page of the materials that we gave you shows a little pie chart in the middle, and this reflects basically the 3 different sources that make up the bulk of the work we do: consumer complaints, criminal history complaints, and departmental complaints. Consumer complaints is a broad category that reflects anything that comes from someone outside of the agency. A consumer, of course, makes up the bulk of those. There are also industry types of complaints where perhaps one air conditioning contractor will complain against another. There are complaints by city officials in some of our programs. City officials also have regulatory authority to some extent over some of the programs that we regulate, and so when they observe violations, they can refer those back to us. Criminal history complaints arise from license applications. When an individual applies for a license, for an original license, or at each renewal, they are subject to a criminal background check. And if the licensing division, upon reviewing their criminal background check, finds that there are crimes that may be a cause for concern with reference to our criminal conviction guidelines, then they will refer those over to enforcement. And then the final category are departmental complaints. These are complaints that arise from inspections that are done. Some of our statutes require routine or periodic inspections of facilities, and when those inspections yield results that rise to a certain level of seriousness, they are referred to the enforcement division for formal enforcement action. So in enforcement, there are 104 of us in the whole division, and we investigate and resolve about 12,000 complaints a year. So that's a lot, and I'm really proud of those numbers, and I'm really proud of the process that we've developed and the very hard work and efficient work that my employees do. One of the ways that we're able to be so efficient is that we have certain guidance policies that govern the work that we do, so we're not on each day just kind of trying to figure it out as we go along. So some of those guidance policies are things that we're going to bring to you and ask your help in developing with regard to your profession. Two of those are the criminal conviction guidelines and the enforcement plan. We will come to you first for the criminal conviction guidelines because we need those right now, because licensing is already receiving license applications, and so they need the criminal conviction guidelines to know which crimes should be appropriately a basis for denying someone a license. And so we'll ask at agenda item H for you to appoint a work group today to work with enforcement on the development of these enforcement policies, and then we'll get to work with you pretty quickly. The enforcement plan is the second policy we'll work on, and it sets out the specific ranges of penalties and license sanctions that a person is subject to for any violation of the statute or rules. We will lift the violations out of the statutes and rules, plop them into a format where they're organized according to how serious they are, and then we'll apply penalties and sanctions to each one of those groups. It sounds like a daunting task, but it's really not that difficult. And we definitely need your guidance because we can make a guess at how serious we think something sounds, but we don't know. And so that's what you're here for, and we're very much looking forward to taking advantage of your expertise. I'll leave the statistics for your reading. I won't go over those, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about any of our materials.
Any questions for Ms. Kaiser? So I assume, development of a penalty matrix type thing is where that's headed to help and kind of guide some of those, or fine-tune how it applies to not air conditioner type complaints, but more.
Right. The enforcement plan contains a
Podiatry
separate
issues.
penalty matrix for each of the programs that we administer. So
Perfect.
when we work with you, it'll just be about your profession.
This is going to be a great spreadsheet to follow based on where we were a year ago, even to where you can go now with how lucky we are or fortunate, or I don't know, luck sounds like we chose our path. We did kind of choose our path, but this is like a huge benefit to us with enforcement and investigation, because before we were strapped, and now we are not. So that's
Yes, sir.
great,
Yes, sir.
really great.
Well,
Good.
thank you.
And Dr. Motley, Brian Francis, I don't know if you can see in Christina's left eye that there is she has a gleam when she talks about enforcement. She lives and breathes enforcement, and her team does do a fantastic job. 12,000 complaints is nothing to sneeze at. But the thing I want to point out is that they are given the due diligence and care for each of those complaints. She has an assistant that works them through, but the complaints that need more work, that need greater attention, they're not rushing through those. They're freeing up their time so they can give that deliberation, whether they need an expert, whether they need a panel, or they're working it within their staff. And that's something I appreciate about what Christina and her team does.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to that resource, so don't take it as we're really going to abuse it, but this is a huge benefit for us. And when people make a complaint and they don't get a resolution, they feel like they weren't heard.
Right,
Sometimes that's the purpose of the complaint.
right.
So this is, we've been looking forward to this particular arm of benefit too, so thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, that was agenda item E3. Next is E4, Education and Examination Division.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Ray Pizarro, Director for the Education Examination Division. And again, welcome. Just to give you, not to go over everything we did in the summit, but just to give you a little recap, E&E, Education Examination Division, was created back in 2004. As we foresee our growth, we figured we needed to make some changes, and those changes were to centralize the pre-education, the continuing education, and the examination portions that we conduct throughout all of the different industries that we regulate. There are over 20 industries that we look at pre-education. Some of those would be, or even the pre-education that is required to obtain a licensure, as yours has a pre-education. Some of the industries we actually approve the curriculum and approve the work that's going to be done that is required for that industry. So you have that type of component, and then you have continuing education on those folks who have become licensed. And we look at nearly over 4,000 different courses that is approved by our division. And we would begin now to start auditing those courses of continuing education. So we have that component as well. And of those programs, we have at least 25 different industries that have a continuing education component. We also have the education part of it, the examination part of it, and that has over 26 industries that require some component of having an examination delivered and administered for those different licenses. We administer over 60,000 exams a year, and we're able to do that through a third-party vendor, which is PSI. And I'll go over that a little bit with your particular exam. Get my bearings straight. I'm going to leave it right there for right now. I'll leave it to see if you have any questions about that. Let me just go over some of the exam pieces of it, because I think it's critical. We have made some changes with your particular exam, podiatry exam, and in the past, that examination was $250, and we brought that down to $60. Let me say that again. It's $60 exam. And we're able to do that, and we're administering that exam throughout the state. We have over 27 different locations with PSI that exam is being administered.
One quick question.
Sure.
So that's only at in-state testing centers?
No. We created a candidate information bulletin that is available on the website and available to all candidates. And in that bulletin, we provide the candidates the locations of where they're located in Texas, how to get there, and that kind of stuff. We also have a little paragraph in there that says if you're testing out of state, you can plug in your zip code and it'll pull up the closest and nearby PSI exam.
So PSI is national?
Yes. And we actually have administered one of our first exam in September. It was an out-of-state exam. So we're able to do that as well. And it's still $60.
Thank you.
You'll receive an exam score immediately. So once you leave that test center, you're walking out whether you failed or successfully passed that examination. And those who have failed can retest immediately. We have also on our exam score sheet, we have some real estate on that score sheet where we can provide the candidates information, feedback, whether it be if they fail, what I do next, on how do I retest and that kind of thing, or if they pass, where do I go now? So we utilize that section of that score sheet, and it will change here and there just depending on what we need to communicate with that candidate. So that's kind of a good tool to try to reduce some of the phone calls that you heard from Trey. Eligibility confirmation, we'll get that through them via email. Right now, the podiatry eligibility is not automated, it's not electronic like we do with some of our other industries. Right now, we have tons of eligibilities happening electronically. Well, we're kind of manually doing it right now. There's not that many, but we'll get there. We'll get that automated. You'll still see the transparency now as you would once it becomes automated. We are looking for subject matter experts, and that has been posted on our website to vet the license examination. They need to be reviewed. They haven't been reviewed, and we need to look at those. So that went out on January 18th, I believe we posted that, and one of my staff is going to be getting the applications in. We're going to put together a group. We're hopefully going to meet sometime in May is a tentatively meeting time with that group, and basically we're going to ask them, are these questions, where do we go? Do they need to be updated? What are we testing here? In the past, we've had other industries that have asked questions to how many people are on the advisory board. Well, that doesn't make me a better licensee, you see. So we really need to roll up our sleeves and understand what is it that we want to ask to make sure that we are testing the minimally competent person to get that license, especially in this industry. So we're going to be looking at those things. We'll look at the strengths and weaknesses. We'll look at are the items performing well? Are they poorly performing? If everyone's getting the question right, that's considered a poorly performing type of question. If everybody's getting it wrong, it's also poorly performing. We need to be there in that medium. What are we testing, and is it something we need to be asking? So it's going to be a long process, and those folks who are selected, they're a volunteer, just like you guys are, and so it's going to be a very big help for the department to establish that minimum competency exam. There's 65 questions on the exam currently. It's a 90-minute test, and the pass score is 80%, and it is a closed book. All that is subject is up in the air. What do we want to do with it? Where do we go? We want to make sure we give the candidates the right topics in the candidate information bulletin. I encourage you guys to look at it if you have not looked at the candidate information bulletin. It is available on the website, and it's available for the public to view. So far, as of October 1, we had 4 individuals who tested and 4 passed. It's not a lot of folks to make a determination whether the exam is performing good or not, but it is what it is at this point in time. I will leave it up to that. I can bore you to death with all kinds of other things we do, but I want to leave it up to that, and let me know if you have any questions at this point in time about our meeting with you guys, what we can do for you. You'll see our different stats will come to you. Right now is just exams. If you want to see different reports on how we get what we get or what type of people are testing, just reach out to us and we'll try to have that information available. But right now it's a small universe, but we can make changes as we go through.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Mr. Pizarro?
I got one short one. When you're talking about getting together a committee to evaluate, is there going to be somebody from the advisory board on it with them, or you guys just take what they do and present it back to the advisory board?
We like to, every time we have a subject matter expert group, we've always liked to have, of course, a few of you guys not having a quorum, but we like to have the involvement of the advisory board to be on that subject matter, whether you're going to provide your expertise and be part of it, which sometimes is very valuable, that we hope so, but we do like for you to be there as a witness or as someone to see, oh, this is how it works. So when we come back to this setting, you're able to provide everybody, oh, this is what we talked about, this is what happened, that kind of thing. So yes, we really would want you guys to be involved. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And Dr. Carpenter, Brian Francis, one of the things you'll see later on the agenda on item H is that education and examination work group. Typically, those folks that are on that group will also participate on the as subject matter expert to be involved in that process. You want that connection, and you want the expertise in developing that exam.
If you have, I'll just tell you, if there's maybe not the response you were hoping for with subject matter experts, if you'll let me know. Sometimes it's just a matter of reprompting the same people that always need reprompting. Certainly people within the state would love to do it. Everybody gets busy and kind of forgets. And I'll tell you, if you can cut the exam cost from $250 to $60, there's board certification people that I'd like to introduce you to. Because I'm pretty sure I pay a lot more than $60 a year to take the test. So.
I know, and I'd like reimbursement. No.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. That's fantastic. One of the huge benefits to our to enticing people to Texas, and you've knocked that out already. So good job, fantastic. Anything else? All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Pizarro. That was agenda item E4. Next is E5, Compliance Division. Familiar face.
Good morning. My name is Heather Muir, and I'm a compliance specialist in the Medical and Health Professions Compliance section.
And good morning, members. My name is Hemant Macon. I, too, am a compliance specialist in the Medical and Health Professions section. Heather and I are going to pass the mic back and forth. That's just how we do it, and we'll move on with our item.
So the first thing we're going to talk about is an introduction and overview of the Compliance Division. The Compliance Division is comprised of 3 sections, and those are Business and Building, Mechanical and Business, and finally the Medical and Health Professions section. And the Medical and Health Professions section is the one that supports the podiatry program, as well as 14 other regulatory programs. Stephen Mills is the section director, as our section manager, and he directs and oversees 6 program specialists, compliance specialists, and 1 executive assistant. Each program specialist is assigned between 1 and 5 regulatory programs, depending on the size and complexity of the program. So Hemet will be your lead or primary program specialist, and I will support him with the program, so if there's ever anything that he can't attend, and also it helps for continuity of the program if Hemet ever decides to leave us or take a new position. There'll be a couple of people with some program knowledge.
I'm glaring from the side of the room.
He's not going to get to leave.
Okay, all right.
He's not going anywhere, Brian. It's okay. So some of the duties that the Compliance Division does is we provide subject matter expertise. We act as a single point of contact for technical and complex issues that, such as like what Trey was describing earlier, things that come into customer service that they need assistance with answering, as well as more complex applications that licensing might get. They will contact us for assistance in those matters. We manage and conduct profession-related studies, such as comparisons of licensure requirements in other states and sometimes at the national level. We consult with other divisions regularly, such as GC, licensing, enforcement, and customer service. We also publish a Health Monitor, which is a quarterly informational newsletter. It's delivered via email to individuals and licensees who have signed up to receive TDLR's email subscription service. The first newsletter went out in November, and we're currently working on the second publication that we're shooting for sending within the next 2 weeks. We do a lot of presentations at stakeholder conferences and meetings. Last year in FY17, the Compliance Division staff attended 254 educational presentations and outreach activities, which is a lot. Now, that's not just us 6, that's the whole compliance, so that's those 3 sections that I was talking about earlier. We draft content for program web pages and recommend updates to our web services. We provide internal training on a monthly basis for our customer service and licensing staff, basically to teach and reinforce the various requirements of the law and rules and to help them be more efficient and proficient in their position and provide hopefully improve the final product that our customers receive from TDLR. So at each of your advisory board meetings, you'll receive a report from the Compliance Division. Most likely it will be presented by Hemet, but I could help, and you might see Stephen sometimes as well up here. We will provide any personnel updates, any changes in staff that is not going to include Hemet, outreach activities that we've engaged in since our last meeting or anything that we have upcoming in the future, updates on projects that are relevant to the Podiatry Board, any statistics that might apply to our discussions or functioning of the Podiatry program. So that's a brief overview. Does anyone have any questions on what we do?
Does anyone have any questions?
I got one. You're talking about doing comparison of licensing requirements, which I think is great to do. Do you guys also looking at the comparison of practice acts and everything else when it comes to this?
That certainly would be within the scope of that function. There's also other national entities that do that, like the Federation of Podiatric Medical Boards, and that is an entity that we would, the FPMB, as you know, publishes a compendium with that information that you can do deeper dives into that data, and that's a resource that we would look at as well. So yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions? No? Thank you.
All right, Hemant Macon, again, with the Medical and Health Compliance section. I'm going to jump around just a little bit, give you first a history and overview of the podiatric medicine program. A lot of this you already know. It's good to see everybody again. There are 4 key dates I believe are significant for the history of podiatry in Texas, and that is in 1923, the regulation of podiatry was created by the legislature under an entity through the State Board of Medical Examiners. Decades later, in 1967, what then was the independent board was renamed to the Texas State Board of Podiatry Examiners. And I'm sorry, in 1923, as you know, it was named the State Board of Chiropody or Chiropody Examiners. Moving on to 1996, the name of the agency was changed once more to the Texas State Board of Podiatric Medical Examiners, and that's where the regulation of podiatry left off in the summer, effective September 1. The podiatry program is now at the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. So the key takeaway with that is the regulation of podiatry is evolving and it's improving for the better. And there are a lot more resources and talent at its disposal to, I believe, take it to heights that it's never seen before. So I am happy to be here at TDLR, and we're going to continue to move forward and make this the best podiatry regulatory program that we've had. Moving on, and this naturally just flows into an update and discussion regarding the transition of the podiatry program to TDLR. Heather led up the team that did the consolidation in the summer. And then September rolled around, and we were still continuing with the transition. We still had to conduct many activities to close out the former agency, and now we're doing more detailed work to bring in other aspects of the podiatry program. As you recall, House Bill 3028 was the sunset legislation that transferred podiatry from the TSB PME to TDLR. We've been very, very busy on a daily basis working with all divisions at TDLR to bring in the podiatry program. So a key takeaway there is that this is one program now that interacts with multiple functionally aligned divisions to carry out its mission, again, to levels never seen before. And our work is not yet done. But we've been interacting with the executive staff, general counsel, strategic communication, customer service, human resources, IT, financial services, enforcement, education and examination, and licensing, all to close the former agency and, like I said, to keep moving the program forward. To really reiterate some of the accomplishments of all divisions here, all applications are now available on the TDLR website. They never were at the former agency. Doctors can go online and print that application and submit it. They no longer have to make a request, wait for it to be mailed. So there's a large efficiency there. Applications are streamlined. They've been reduced. Notary requirements have been removed. This was a sunset recommendation to improve that process, so that's been done. As Mr. Pizarro had said, the jurisprudence exam is offered at PSI, at testing sites statewide and nationwide. Doctors no longer have to come to Austin, Texas to take the test, so they are saving hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in travel. We have a large exam coming up in March for the graduating residents, and that's for everybody nationwide. And of course, it's Austin, it's spring, it's March, so you've got South by Southwest, things happening at UT campus, March Madness. Hotel rates go up, airfare goes up, and for many years the doctors had to pay those extra fees just to get their license. They no longer have to do that. So besides saving $190 on the examination, they're saving a lot more in travel and hotel costs. And the exam is virtual daily. They no longer have to wait 3 times a year, with the lone exception being the residents who we would only allow to take the exam in March so that they can be on that final pathway to graduate. The radiology technician registration process, Dr. Martin, you had asked about that, was not disrupted by the program transfer. That being said, there were improvements made to the 400-plus rad techs. In accordance with Senate Bill 674 from the 85th session, the $35 registration fee has been eliminated. The rad techs don't have to pay that cost anymore. And we continue to work with the Texas Medical Board as well to implement the remaining provisions of Senate Bill 674 on radiology requirements and the doctor's ability to delegate radiology tasks to them. As Heather mentioned, customer service and licensing divisions were trained with the program integration teams here before the September 1 consolidation date. Heather had led up that training, and then they had followed up with that after September. And we monitored, especially the license renewals process, to make sure that doctors weren't being hampered by the transition. Again, we monitored the go live, as it's called here, when a new program comes over in September 1. And all the teams worked together to make sure that our customers were served. In addition to working with the Texas Medical Board, we also continue to work with the State Board of Pharmacy on opioid mandates from the 85th session. There's a lot more work to be done with that, and we continue to interact with the Pharmacy Board in their quarterly meetings, and some of these items you will see brought back to you at some level at a work group or possibly throughout the rulemaking process. So I'm happy to report several improvements in about a 5-month period of time. I think it's exciting, it's innovating, and we're at a good place, and we've only just begun. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Hemant? Yeah, we're already checking boxes that we tried to get things done for months and years that we couldn't do before, and now you've already knocked a bunch of those out. That's awesome. Very cool. Very good.
Mike's
All right.
going back to Heather.
Heather Muir, compliance. So the final piece of our report today includes our public outreach activities. There were several TDLR staff that attended the September 2017 Texas Podiatric Medical Association Southwest Foot and Ankle Conference in Frisco. We hosted a booth. We were able to meet a lot of podiatrists. We also met some residents that had questions about the exams. We were able to answer questions about the transition, any changes that were going to be coming up for the program, the differences between the TSB PME and TDLR. So it was very helpful information. We had a lot of questions from people that stopped by throughout the day. So it was really good for us to be there and have that interaction. We were also able to attend several of the sessions, and Mr. Francis actually provided the final session of the conference, which is the ethics session. We had a lot of positive interaction, a lot of good feedback during that conference. On December 11th, Hemant and I met with representatives from TPMA. We had a really great meeting with them. We covered some information about webpage updates that they needed, that they were going to make, or were inquiring about, contacts, how to contact TDLR, who to contact and when, information about the assistant changes as well. And we do plan to staff the booth at the Texas Podiatric Medical Association's annual conference in Galveston in June 2018. And we feel like public outreach is a huge, vital part of what we do. So if you ever hear of anything that, or aware of anything that we could attend and give a presentation, or just attend and have a booth and answer questions, just let Hemant or I know, and we'll be glad to get that on our schedule. Any final questions? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that was agenda item E5, now moving to E6, Executive Office.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Francis, Executive Director with TDLR. First of all, I'd like to echo what our folks have been saying, which is thank you for your continued service. I was extremely thrilled when I heard that you guys had signed back up. I know it feels short straw on your part, but on our part, it is fantastic to have you here. I remember attending your last meeting, and at that meeting, I learned a lot about your personalities, learned a lot about your commitment to service, and that's a big deal. We're going to need you. We're going to need you in this transition. I'm extremely proud of the staff and what they've done. They've done a great job in bringing it over. There's no question that Hamed and Christine and Veronica are the ultimate security blankets in a transition. Your industry is different than most of ours. Most of the other programs have licenses that renew across, the year. And having them congested, during the August and September and October time period creates a unique challenge, but also an opportunity. And having him there, and he was sitting in the control center and making sure things worked out. It was comforting. It was comforting to know that we could navigate that. But we do have some work to do. Before I go any further, I wanted to introduce you to some of the folks in the executive team. We've got Carla James, who's the Deputy Executive Director, and we have Nick Boenis, who is the Chief of Staff. And then I'd also like to introduce Mary Winston. Typically at your meetings, you're going to see one of us or all four of us here to kind of walk things through and kind of be the comic relief to make the meeting a little bit more lighter, since Dr. Motley is kind of dry in his presentations. But maybe that'll change over time. There is some, as my boys would say, there's some shout outs I want to give. And part of it is to TPMA. And Don, I appreciate you. I appreciate the conversations we had. If you guys know Don very well, he's very frank and very blunt and very direct. He's also very frank and very blunt and direct when he's going to be giving up that helm. And so he pretty much kind of let me know what would be acceptable and what would not be acceptable. And we're going to live up to that challenge. And I appreciate that. Mark, thank you. During the session, you and I jousted and we rattled our sabers, but we're here now. And we're going to move in the right direction, make sure this thing works the way it's supposed to, and that's to support Texans and make sure we have a very safe program to where there are individuals who are qualified to do the job. I mean, at the end of the day, we all share that goal, and we're going to make sure that happens, so I appreciate that. A couple of things I wanted to touch on. Again, we talked about the transition. As you kind of get your bearings and your footing here, you're going to have a lot of questions. And you saw the array of folks that can come up there, whether it's Trey and Ray and Hamed and Heather. Heather, I've got to point her out, she led the bill implementation team during the summer and through this process. Absolutely is becoming just a knowledge broker in all things podiatric. And so it's important to recognize her role in this as well. But as you go through and you have questions, this is a familiar lifeline. And Christine's going to be your lifeline. She's the connection to all things TDLR. If you have a question about licensing process, information on how the enforced process works, shoot it to Christine. She'll get it to the right folks and get the information back to you. You know her. She's done a great job. In fact, at the last meeting of yours, there were opportunities, and we were hoping that him and Christine and Veronica and Priscilla would join our team. We're trying to figure out where's the right role, and when I saw how she could tame this group and keep him in check, I was like, man, I think we've got an opportunity for her. That's one board. Let's give her 12 and 13 to work on. So she got rewarded by an increase in those responsibilities, but she's doing great, and she's a very important part of their team that they have there. I enjoyed meeting the doctors at the conference in September. That's part of my personality and my style, is to make the connection. Heather hit it out the ballpark when she said, we are available to talk to any group. I think some of our other agencies, I think they fall short in recognizing the value of being present and building relationships. And it only comes through time and conversation. That's where the benefit of the doubt comes in, where, yes, we have a regulatory responsibility, but if we drop the ball, and we will absolutely drop the ball, I think you're going to recognize that they didn't drop it on purpose. And if we did drop it, you're going to talk to us. And along those lines, I need to apologize to Dr. Lunsford. We didn't give you guys enough time with the rules. And that's not how we do it. We fell a little short. And I want you to know that today, when Colleen goes through every rule line by line, syllable by syllable, that you don't have to make a decision today. There is no compression on that. You can get the rules today, we can talk it through, then we can come to your next meeting and then go from there and have a decision. So there's no dead stop that has to take place on that. But that's not something that we do, and we'll work on that, and we'll improve on that. You got good socks, but I'm not going to let you win every battle in the sock game, so we're going to figure that out too. A couple of things that are coming down the road is our strategic planning process, and at TDLR we take it extremely seriously. It's an important part of who we are. You may have heard our spiel, but this last session we had over 58 strategic initiatives that we brought to the legislature. 56 of them passed. And it wasn't because we're some genius, it's because we took great ideas from our licensee population, from the consumer groups, and from our employees that made sense. And we vetted those issues and said, you know, this sells, this will work, this will improve the way that we regulate. Over the months of March and April, you'll start getting information saying TDLR is coming to Houston or coming to Dallas or wherever, and we'll have a session that'll include you and probably some other health groups. And it's very simple. We're going to ask you, you know, what do we do well? What can we do better? If you're king or queen for a day, what's one change you would make in the way that the statute or rule or process? And man, you're talking about the great ideas that come out of that. It's going to be awesome. So we look forward to inviting you and having you part of our TDLR strategic planning process as we move forward with that. Last thing I want to talk about very briefly is, you know, one of the big changes that's on the horizon is the licensing system that we inherited is, it may be Model T-ish. It may be somewhere there. It's definitely not, you know, a DeLorean from Back to the Future, but it's got some work to do. So we're on that system now. We brought it over. When you do a transition that really gives you 3 months to work on, it's super challenging. It's not the easiest thing to do, and so you bring a lot of stuff over as is, and then you start tweaking as it gets here. That will be one of the projects we're working on, is figuring out which licensing system we're going to move that to. Do we put it on Versa? Do we put it on our Tulip system or something else? You guys will be the guinea pig in that moment, and I imagine there will be some interesting moments that come out of that. But we'll keep you apprised as we're moving forward with that transition to what I believe will be a better and superior licensing system than what you currently have. Right now, I was looking at some of the numbers that Nick had provided to us. We have about 2,606 folks that are subscribers to the Podiatry email listserv. That's a great number. I mean, you're sitting at about 1,100, 1,300 licensees, so there's a little bit double of the interest in there, and that's good because that's a primary way of reaching out to the licensed population. Here's the health monitor. Here are the proposed rules. Come to the advisory board meeting. People are getting those notices, and I think that's the transparency that we're shooting for as an organization. Mr. Chairman, I believe that's all I have on my notes, or all that I can read with my poor penmanship. So I'm available to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions or comments for Mr. Francis or his team?
And I definitely want to give Nick and Carl an opportunity to speak if you guys have anything to say. Gloss over. You good? Okay.
Good. Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That was agenda item E6. We'll change gears now. Agenda item F, discussion, overview, and possible recommendation regarding proposed new rules to Chapter 130.
Good morning again, board members. Colleen Tran, Assistant General Counsel. I have physical copies of the rules if anybody needs them. If not, in the chart, the reference chart, just let me know if you guys need a copy and I can give that to you guys. If not, I'm going to go through a quick overview and then we'll go section by section through the rules themselves. I have Hammett here, just in case. So this was really an opportunity for me and the team to learn about the industry. We went through the rules as they transferred over verbatim. They were originally in 9 different chapters. We transferred them over into 1 chapter and multiple subsections. So we went through those rules line by line as a group, and individually people came with their comments, things that were needed, things that needed to be changed, and some rearranging organization ideas. And we've worked together in August and September, and across all the divisions, education, enforcement, licensing, we all worked together and looked at the rules, compliance. And what you have before you is the rearranged, hopefully easier to read version of the current rules. I tried really hard to keep everything as they currently are. I didn't want to change scope, how your standard of care, and anything in the practice that you have now, just putting it in a organizational scheme that made a little bit more sense. So all of your board stuff is at the beginning, and this is, you can go through the reference chart. It will show you there are maybe 5 or 6 points. There are some substantive changes, and we'll go through them and I'll point them out as we go through. But then moving on to, your temporary residency license, which is what somebody would go to first, and then going into your DPM license and everything you would need to know there as a practitioner and things that really apply to you, and then going into how you do your practice, your medical offices, your advertising, and then at the very end, your fees and your enforcement staff and administrative things. So I tried to create that organizational scheme of how you would look at it, and then go to that subsection, and everything you would need would hopefully be there, or at least point you into the right direction of where you would eventually need to be. I'm going to start, unless you guys have any questions, and I'm going to go page by page through the actual underlined. So the reason that everything is underlined and it's proposed new is that we're going to do a full repeal of the section, and then we'll publish this as all new language. But just so you guys know, I do have the original rules with strike-through and underlined, so if you guys have questions about how it may have originally been worded or if it was verbatim coming over, then I can go through and pull that, or else Hemet knows them all by heart, actually. So he probably could tell you. So all of our rule sections start with the authority, so we map out Chapter 51 and Chapter 202 as the authority with which we have to do our rules, and then we go straight into the definitions. I've pulled the definitions that were pertinent to the licensing and regulation of podiatry, and we've also, as we were going through, realized that there was not a definition for continuing medical education, so we've added that definition, which did not previously exist in your rules. Subchapter 2 is all verbatim from the statute about the advisory board. So that entire chapter reads as the statute does in 202. Subchapter C, which is section 130.30, is where we begin the temporary residency license. This is your general requirements and the application requirements. We've tried to put everything in which you would need to know right off the bat to do your application right at the beginning.
Colleen,
Yes,
on
sir.
this particular section, Brian Francis, didn't we insert the word residency in there?
We did.
Okay.
And used to just say temporary license, but it got a little difficult because then there was a temporary license. So to delineate between the two, this is where you are temporary and actually you're working through your residency. So we made that distinction between your residency and temp and one that was just a provisional or a temporary license, just to make it clear and really kind of bring recognition to where you are in your practice at that point. You are a resident, so that should be the way you're named on your license, not just temp. 130.31 are the requirements for your residency and the program.
If I could clarify, on it's page 6, it's 130.31 letter C. There is just something, and I assume this is just an old language. In letter C it says, the residency director must report to the department a list of all residents enrolled in the program, the names of all the directors in the program. There's one director per program.
Should be the names of all the residents.
Yeah. So letter C, kind of the last line.
The names.
End
all
of
the-
line 2 and beginning of line 3.
Mhm.
Where it
So-
says names of all the directors, should that be residents? If it's supposed to be directors, then there's only one director.
That's correct.
Okay.
So, Dr. Motley, just to be clear, so we've got the residency director will have already told us who they are, because they're reporting it. So must report to the department a list of all the residents enrolled in the program, and then we strike the names of all the directors in the program?
Right. I
And
mean,
then still
I think
keep
if you strike it, I didn't mean to step on you there, Mr. Francis.
Oh, that's fine.
If you strike through pretty
Been
much.
married twice, I'm used to it, it's okay.
If you just strike, beginning at where it says the names of all the directors in the programs
Yes, sir.
and which program each individual is enrolled in. Number one, each individual is only enrolled in one program, so it's really redundant after the word, when it starts the names of all all that should strike
Perfect.
to the end of that.
Thank you.
So I'm going to end with a period after residents enrolled in the program. Instead of comma,
Correct.
it'll be a period.
Correct.
And Dr. Martley, if it is okay with you, the plan is to go through, get the edits, and then at the end, if the board is comfortable with it and wants to do a vote, we would say with the recommendations made, or if it's your desire, we can do each change as we go through, however you want it to flow.
Yep.
Emmett and Brian, I got a question for you guys. Looking through the whole thing, I like everything you did in regard to the residency stuff, the temporary, the resident license and all that. And the reason I asked you the question before, or not you, but the taking the exam, why would we not require residents come into the state to take the licensing exam before they even get the temporary residence license, so they understand the rules and laws of the state, because they can take it from any state? Why do we wait and make them take it during their third year, right before they get their permanent license? I think we should have it where they take it before they ever show up and have to pass it and understand what the rules of the state are.
I think there's some value in that. One, we didn't want to change anything in that substantive in basically it was a cleanup draft. But the question, and him had touched on this when he was doing his presentation, is we would ask, the general question is that how other states do it? Do other states have them examined before they come on a temporary basis, or are they just trying to get them acclimated to the process and line them up with somebody?
The only reason I throw that out there, from a liability standpoint, the residency director is always going to be held liable for his residents. But it helps the residents to understand certain actions and things within the state, because they do act independent. The residency director is not with the residents 24 hours a day. They do act independent with patient contact at times.
And that's something we can definitely look at.
And your scope of practice is different per state on what you can practice. So if someone's coming from Virginia and coming here to practice, they may think they're allowed to do something here that they actually cannot. Well, as a resident, I guess you can, under the guidance of
Right.
the person. Excuse me.
Something for our work group when we get there to look at for temporary residencies?
Yes.
So we'll put that under suggestions moving forward. I'll mark that 13032 and
Yeah.
just put that on our list.
We'll definitely add that to
Okay.
our task
got it.
list to follow up on.
Thank you.
And so 130.32 is everything that's required in your final year of residency. So all of subchapter C deals with the temporary residency license. Subchapter D, 130.33 is the extension of that. You can extend your temporary license, and it lays out how long it's valid and how many times you can extend it.
Well, I got a question on that as well. It says here you can renew it twice. What if a resident needs to renew it the third time due to sickness? Somebody that's out has complications with having a baby or some other thing, and they're out of residency for 6 months, and then they have to come back and get a license to make up that last 6 months. They would have to take that exam for a third time, and we don't have a pathway for them to do that via this.
And
Two
there is a
times-
fellowship program offered with some of these residencies in the state.
2 times is what you guys had in your original rule, so it was a max of 2 times. I'm not married to it, I'm just transferring what you guys had previously. So is that something that you want to change at this point, or is it something that you want to discuss as a part of your entire temporary?
I think we should put it with the work group. to look at it. And fellows, when you look at the fellows, they're going to be licensed fully anyway.
Yeah, they're full license, not under anybody's license. Okay, so that's 2 on the work group. Okay.
Dr. Motley and Dr. Carpenter, I think that's a great, one, the work groups is where the heavy lifting really takes place, and the wrestling about concepts. But even in this particular instance, you know, one would think, oh my gosh, are they pulling up the ladder, you know, by having the exam early? Well, that's a hurdle they're going to have to clear either way. But then in this conversation, you're extending their opportunity to be able to come in. I think that's a good balance. I think that's good business. Good stuff.
It's scary. We actually read through all this before the meeting.
It's scary. I did too.
And I'm so thankful that everybody did. Subchapter D is where you do your Doctor of Podiatric Medicine. All of your license requirements are here. Dot 40 is your general requirements and about the application. Again, everything that you would need to know or is required of you to do your application is in this section. Dot 41 is specifically about the jurisprudence exam. There is a change in this section. There used to be a 3-time limit. If you fail 3 times, then you can't take it again. We've removed that limitation or ban on a complete ban if you fail 3 times. There isn't a large failure rate.
No.
Okay, so it's not a huge concern, but it is a limitation that we did remove as we were going through.
Brian Francis, it's a no-fail exam. It's when you finish it, you're going to know what you need to know. So it wasn't a hurdle.
Dot 42, your renewals and the terms. Dot 43 lays out provisional license requirements. It is a rather long section. Dot 44 does all of your continuing medical education in that section. And there is, starting with subsection J, that audit process is new. It is E&E's Education and Examinations audit process and how they will account for continuing medical education hours. Dot 45 does the allowance.
Can we go back, Brian Francis? So, as the rules are currently written, what is the current process to determine if somebody, and him and I'm kind of looking at you,
I am too.
if somebody has continuing education, what was the authority? Was it done by investigation? Was it done by complaint? How does the current process look versus this new?
Sure. Hemmett Macon, again with compliance.
You need to get a little bit closer to the mic.
Yes, sir.
My friend, this is the most important thing that's going to be said all day, I'm sure.
Yes, sir, you got it. I am up close to the mic, all right. So as the language, for the most part, came over from the former agency's rules, there was an auditing process.
Okay.
You attested to your completion of continuing medical education, CMEs, annually upon renewal, and then from there, a group of 100 doctors were randomly selected for an audit. And during the audit process, if you did not have your hours, you were fined $100 per hour. Of course, we have an enforcement plan here, so that is something that would be revisited. The other method to account for continuing medical education was the board could do it in pursuit of an investigation. And they could order somebody to obtain CME for remedial measures. But the most prominent method was through the random audit process.
And Brian Francis, members, I just wanted to let you know that there was an audit process in place. This is just simply making the audit process look like our other health programs and how Ray team would do it. But fundamentally, it's the same. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Question?
If I'm reading this right, on the auditing, it's just going to be on a monthly ongoing process, not just once a year at the time of renewal? Is that the way I read this? So you guys could check somebody in January or March or
It'll be random.
random, but it won't
Yeah,
be
it's fine.
just at the time of renewal of the license, correct?
And item 3, failure to timely furnish this information. What is timely?
Christina, what would you determine timely to be?
Christina Kaiser. In other programs,
Sorry, Stephen. That was good, though. You're ready.
in other programs where we have a timely, that kind of language in the statute, typically when the request is made by the department, we will give a deadline, whether it's 10 days or 30 days, whatever it is. And so failure to satisfy the deadline that the department sets would be determined to be untimely.
What is that usually?
I don't know. On audit things, I don't know. CE audits, I'm guessing 10 days, 15 days, 20, something like that. It's not going to be a year, certainly.
And members, we can insert a time in there if that gives you comfort. Definitely not adverse to that.
I don't know where our current one is. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's probably a good idea just to put the bar up there.
Sure.
So if it needs to be 14 business days or 14 calendar days.
Yeah, 10 business days is 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because you either have them or you don't have them.
Right.
Yeah, Hemet previously, it was 10 days, 2 weeks, and most agreed orders that we would send
30
30 days.
30 calendar days.
30 calendar.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's,
That works for us.
okay.
Absolutely.
Anybody have problems on, did Dr. Lunsford, did he bring that up?
Yeah.
Was it, okay, item number 3, J3, failure to timely furnish this information. Yeah, within 30 calendar days.
Mr. Chairman, if I could offer this.
Yes, sir.
Under J1, the last sentence, I think it was a great point made that, with the renewals clustering in one location, unlike the other programs, maybe just putting a period after the word renewal, as opposed to each renewal month. I think that's consistent with the other programs, but that monthly thing doesn't pick in there, or maybe calling them can make it something smarter that matches all the licenses expiring at one point. But
What scares me is if we say at renewal, since everybody's being renewed at one time, that's a huge amount of work on your staff to get it in. That's the reason I was asking, the way I interpreted it, I understand now why.
Mhm.
I don't have a problem with them auditing
Spreading
me
it out.
any month
Okay.
of the year.
okay.
Yeah, so that was for clarification, that's a J1, period after the word renewal at the end of the first line, striking the word month, and then starting again with license holder. Is that right, Mr. Francis?
If we could let Colleen them come up with it, but it
Yeah.
sounds like it's something like, for audit, a random sample of license holders for compliance with this continuing education requirement.
Throughout
And
the
now
year.
it's not tied to the renewal time period, it's just, you should always be in compliance with it,
Right.
whenever you're asked to provide it.
Okay. So we'll leave that open under the terms with changes
Thank you
wherever
very much.
y'all determine. Okay.
Dot 45 are your exceptions and allowances for CMEs. And then 130.46 is your inactive statuses for the license. Now, there is a change in here. There used to be a 4-year limit on how long you could be inactive. We've removed that limit on how long you can be inactive. And we've also adjusted how you come back into compliance with your CME hours to match what we've done with our other licensees when they come back in from being inactive to active status, which is Part 3. So complete the CME that is required for renewal on an active license during just the preceding licensing period.
So 25 hours.
Yes.
Okay.
Dot 47 are the hyperbaric oxygen certificate requirements and guidelines. And then in section dot 48 are your nitrous oxide oxygen inhalation, conscious sedation, registration requirements, guidelines, and in direct supervision. And Dr. Campbell, I have under A, it should be by pharmacological.
Yes.
And then Under subsection B, it should be patient's ability to maintain a patent ARA,
Yes.
P-A-T-E-N-T.
Patent or patent, yes.
Yes, patent, okay.
Thank you.
And that takes us to the end of the subchapter for DPMs. So subchapter E lays out the responsibilities of all the practitioners, and it has a section specifically for code of ethics. As I was going through, I noticed that there were a lot of ethics-based rules that I felt should be in one section so that it kind of lays out what the practitioner should be held to. It starts, the section starts with dot 50, which is practitioner identification, professional corporations or associations, requirements and how you name. Then you have advertising in dot 51. Dot 52 deals with the medical offices. And then flowing from there are the requirements in dot 53 for radiological technicians. Now, notice here the changes have been made to account for Senate Bill 674. Hemet, myself, my boss Brad Bowman, and Brian have had lots of talks back and forth with the medical board and how it was laid out there and how we're going to continue to ensure that the rad techs are taken care of here and in line with 674. So in that section, you'll see that their education is laid out here now, and it's no longer at TMB. It's verbatim from how it was, or where was it before? DSHS? DSHS, which is now at TMB. They've proposed in their rulemaking to remove it with the understanding that they'll still have control over the overarching NCTs and the instructors, but the training course is now in our rules.
Question about some of the language in F. Is that from the previous language? 3. Yeah, on page 14.
Hold on. Don't think so.
Specifically, I had a question about foot radiological procedures. They're trained to take foot and ankle radiological procedures, take foot and ankle x-rays. So I don't know if we need to address that language.
So I believe I mirrored that to how medical board lays out their scope.
Well,
I also understand the world of ankle, or lack thereof. It is a slippery slope that I am not 100% willing to take without my boss in the back being behind me.
I just wanted to point out, without any scope issues, other scope issues, the practical taking of x-rays of the foot includes an ankle. You can't take an x-ray of the rear foot without taking an x-ray of the ankle.
And under our billing and coding,
They're separate.
And plus,
it's set up as ankle for guys to look at ankle sprains and everything else, which is within the scope.
well, and beside that, our training program does teach taking ankle x-rays. I mean, that's a part of the training. So I just wanted to make sure we're
Yeah.
clear about that, and we're not changing language because of other scope issues.
We definitely don't want to run headfirst in this. So what if we change the language to speak to performing radiological services in order to assist the performance of whatever it is? So instead of saying foot radiological procedures,
Could I use-
radiological procedures for the performance of,
Could I use podiatric?
yes. And if we
Yes.
put
Would you be
podiatric
okay
there-
with may
Podiatric.
perform only podiatric radiological procedures?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
perfect.
just so you don't feel like you're on a slippery slope with that one, remember, there's a difference between diagnosis and treatment. So an x-ray is for diagnosis. I can order x-rays of anything.
Right.
So
Great
that
point.
nobody gets their upset about diagnosis. People get feathers ruffled over treatment.
Great point, thank you.
And my only concern is I didn't want to limit anything here. by
Perfect.
that language.
Yeah, absolutely right.
So I'm going to take both references to foot, and I'm going to use the phrase podiatric, or the term podiatric.
Perfect.
And as far as the language goes, when you say film screen, in that same item, film and film screen,
Is that a little dated?
that's dated.
Very.
Film screen, it should be or it should be image receptor would probably be a better generic term to include all of digital x-ray.
You could almost just strike the phrase utilizing standard film or film screen and combinations, and you could just leave it for foot radiological procedures. Or you're going to strike foot, put podiatric medicine, radiological
Yeah,
procedures, and strike the rest.
You can just go to design for, yeah.
Dr. Motley, will you walk me
Yeah,
through that one more time?
clarification 3F, a podiatric medical radiological technician must hold a registration and may perform only, whatever your term was for foot. You said podiatric
Podiatric.
medical radiological procedures, period, strike the rest. Because then you're not going to define what equipment they use. That's purposeless, so.
I would strike it up to design for foot radiological procedures or you think strike the whole thing?
Well, I would strike the whole thing, because if you're in an office like mine, where you have big O full size, right? If they're just shooting foot, then they can just shoot foot. Otherwise, you're limited to the old XL or.
And Brian France, I'll just add this, Colleen, if you look at 2C, just a little bit above that, the concept of podiatric radiologic procedures is already built into the rules that we carried over from medical board, so it makes perfect sense for us to do it here as well.
Okay.
Every now and then I have to extend a comforting blanket to Colleen and her general counsel legal sensibilities.
I'm in a period after procedure.
Okay.
Okay.
I have another two questions, actually.
Okay.
On G, has that been part of our understanding that x-rays can only be taken by a podiatry assistant when the doctor's in the office?
Hammett Macon. That language came over verbatim from the former agency. So under the enabling statute in Chapter 601 of the Occupations Code, a practitioner, which would include a podiatrist, may delegate these radiological procedures to a person, and that is the extent of the statute. The language about the podiatrist then being on the premises was for a safety reason, and that came over from the old rules.
Do you want me to read how it used to read?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. It used to read, "A registrant shall perform radiological procedures only under the supervision of a podiatric physician physically present on the premises." So the physically present is always in there.
I don't think we need to make any changes at this point, but I'd like to have that be addressed by the work group.
Absolutely, that's good.
There are times when x-rays are taken in an office when the doctor's not sure. It's just a practicality of practice.
Sure.
And the question I asked earlier about the one person that was renewed, the one podiatry under licensing, we talked, there was one person that was renewed. There's kind of a different classification of someone whose training lapses, and then they have to go back and get their retraining. I'm not sure renewal is the proper term for that person, because they're all renewed annually, correct? Even though there's not a fee, they all have to be renewed annually. So I think there's a different classification for a podiatry assistant that lets their training lapse. They don't practice for a while, but then when they go back, they have to redo their training. And I don't think you can call them recertified, because there was a big problem with that term in the past, but there is that.
Would they not have to would they not have to complete everything at some point over again and apply
Yes.
as new?
Yes, they do.
Definitely after 3 years.
After 3 years, so it would be,
I would think after
New.
they fail to renew on their yearly basis, they're out of compliance.
that could be something the group could discuss, a limit before, where you would have to complete the training again, is an option for the group to discuss when they're
I
doing.
think that'd be another item for us to discuss.
And Dr. Martin, just to kind of give you context on this particular issue here, virtually the whole world of regulatory agencies have language that if you allow your license to expire, you do not renew timely, it stops at 2 years and says you have to start back over. At TDLR in Chapter 51, we had that extended to 3 years. And so that's why the 3 years was in there. And so we'll need to make sure that we harmonize that Chapter 51 provision with what we're talking about here, okay? Mr. Chairman, if I could ask Colleen a question. Like, you had all this opportunity in the world to ask me questions now. Colleen, on the top of page 23 and L1, should that be executive director or commission versus department or commission?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else in that one?
No, thank you.
Dot 40 are your records.
54?
54.
Oh. It's because Brian threw me for a loop.
You-
Dot
As soon as
54.
that MJ moonwalking back on the rules.
And then I pulled into dot 55 everything that, in my reading, was an ethics, code of ethics that should be in one place that a practitioner should follow. Dot 56 is the general authority to delegate. And then dot 57 are the lengthy sexual misconduct section.
Mr. Chairman, we wrestled internally on this section here. We had some debate about do we take it out, do we include it in? It came over as is, but definitely is fodder for discussions in the work group. In the current environment we're in, there's a lot of discussion about sexual harassment. We need to be careful about what language comes out, but I think we can maintain the spirit of what's here without being unduly burdensome and parental in our approach. These are professionals that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think, I agree with you. I think that's something best tackled in a work group, but since it came straight over, then we'll stay that way. But, you know, that's part of our sunset thing was when we talked about even licensed, doctors having a high moral ground, or whatever the wording was. They wanted all that out of there.
Mm-hmm.
You say, we want you to be a good person, and they wanted that out. So it may fall in the same vein as this, like you said, without parenting, you can say, be a normal person, not a bad person, and then find some lawyerese to make it say that.
Subchapter F has all of the fees. And then in subchapter G are all of the enforcement provisions. Complaints and claims I combined together. And then dot 71 and 72 are TDLR standard enforcement authority and administrative penalty and sanctions language. So that is new, but it does encompass the old subchapter D violations, just much shorter. And then .73 are conditions of suspension of a license.
Mr. Chairman, if I can add something, Colleen, another question. Kind of moonwalking back to page 29, 130.70A. Do we typically include the web page or the web address in that string of services of the name, mailing address, and telephone number of the department?
That is old language, but I can add webpage for us.
That'd be something that the members will be, it'll make it consistent with our other programs of having that form of communication.
Say that again.
Does that, okay, I'm sorry, I'm confused on the conversation. So does that mean the complaint sheet that y'all have that we have to put in our office, you know, just saying if you have complaints, you notify blah, 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 TDLR? Are you saying you're adding the website to that?
Yes.
That's
Yes, that would be.
Okay, sorry.
I'd like to clarify that I didn't want Mr. Francis referred to as blah, blah, blah.
I didn't say he was.
Mr. Chairman, I've been married twice.
Okay.
Whew. This is real audio. This is live. Oh my gosh. I need to quit saying that.
Yeah.
His wife has Wi-Fi.
And that takes us to the end of the actual full rule packet.
Okay. Fantastic. So options now are to,
Recommend that they be published to the Texas Register, saving any clerical, typographical things I need to do, and all of the modifications that we discussed today.
Or if
Or.
if it feels rushed, we can bring them back to the next meeting. Because I definitely want to be respectful to that, Dr. Lunsford. It's a lot.
I read it all.
You good? Okay.
Sunday evening.
All right, thank you, I appreciate that. I do think it's very instructive and helpful for you to receive the document that has the strikeout, because Colleen has placed it in such a way that you can see all the sections that were removed. The vast majority, the overwhelming majority of those were removed because of statutory changes from House Bill 3078, but just kind of seeing it, I think, is helpful.
does anyone want more time? Are you comfortable with the changes recommended today and publishing that? And then you'll have certainly time to respond and consider and make modifications. Nothing's permanent, just publishing.
Absolutely not. And then they'll go out for public comment, and you guys will see them again, and you'll see all of the comments that come in. I'll summarize the comments for you. You'll have received every copy of the comments as well, and we will go through each comment in whatever rule section that it affects when we come back. And we could make further modifications from that. If they are substantive, we'll republish them and go again. And if not, then we'll keep moving.
Anybody want more time, or is everyone comfortable moving forward with those changes? Yeah, it changes, Gary, yeah, she's notes, and then public comment, work groups, there's all types of different sources of information that can go into modifying anything forward, yeah. Dr. Lunsford moved that. Second?
Second.
All right, all in favor, aye? All right, none opposed. Carpenter's out. We're good.
I'm going to go through one more rule section with you. You guys might not have it before you. This does not actually come to the board, but it does affect the board. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is in House Bill 3078, very similar to Senate Bill 202 back in the 84th legislative session. It includes language that basically says that the commission cannot change a rule that deals with scope of practice or ethics for podiatrists. And we just wanted to let you know that we're going to be moving forward with that rulemaking to put it in there just like we have in our Chapter 100. And just wanted Colleen to point that out to you.
Yeah. So what you have before you is the language that from Chapter 51 that was added by House Bill 3078. And then on the second page is the rulemaking. So we have a Chapter 100 that has all of the health-related programs and overarching rules that affect them. And so that is the language that's going to be added to ensure that the standard of care, the ethics, and those type of rules must come through you guys.
Mr. Chairman, I would just add that this is the Mark Hanna amendment, and he earned his keep on this one in both places. He did a good job. He did.
Appreciate your help.
Absolutely.
Always, always. Any questions or concerns about this on 100.1 and .31? Otherwise, we'll take a motion.
But, Mr. Chairman, you don't have to do anything.
Yeah,
It's
you
just-
don't.
It was just instructive. We
Just
Yeah,
wanted
it's
to
just
let
so you
it's
know.
gonna be-
Notification,
Yeah.
okay.
be coming in.
So that's okay. So that's G. See, I told you it'd be easy.
Huh?
I told you it'd be easy.
He did tell me.
Next is agenda item H. So this is discussion and possible appointment of work groups. You can take the possible out. We're going to appoint them right now. So what I did is I went from, they're not verbatim copies, but from our old subcommittees. That's what they were called previously, where everyone had interest in, so that hopefully we can carry some people over that had similar interests, and the new names in these work groups, right? So work groups are, we don't have to be here. You can do a lot of that online and phone, and it's easy, and it can be real time. So if it's okay with you, Mr. Francis, I've kind of got some people in
Yes,
mind
sir.
for all of these.
Absolutely.
And since we don't have any public members, basically out of the 4 work groups, we'll each be on 2
Okay.
work groups. So, and if y'all have any troubles or want to switch or want to complain about something, let me know. The enforcement work group, so that's number 1. I don't know if y'all have the same list I do, but there's basically 4 work groups. I'll go through those first. Enforcement, so that's the penalty matrix we talked about earlier and some other things in reviewing and making sure it's podiatry specific. The second group is licensing, so licensing requirements, rules, inspections, and compliance. The third one, education examination, kind of self-explanatory. And the fourth group is standard of care. So like we were talking about earlier, you know, if they're not used to dealing with podiatry, you know, what lending priority to things and lending your expertise is what is and is not standard of care.
The sexual misconduct provisions would fall into that one. Any of the ethics stuff would fall.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, so enforcement, I had Doctors Lunsford, Peach, and Martin. Licensing, I had Dr. Martin, Campbell, and Carpenter. Education and examination, Doctors Carpenter, Peach, and Motley. And standard of care was Motley, Campbell, Lunsford. So those are certainly flexible. If someone has a interest that's otherwise, we can do that. But otherwise, that gives all of us 2 groups to work within, and kind of, I try to keep us roughly where you had interest before, so there's some expertise you can carry forward. Any questions or concerns about that? Is everybody good with those, or we can not switch? None of them are set in stone. It's flexible. It's all those things. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just kind of operationally.
Yes.
On those advisory boards, you met Christina Kaiser. Her group will, once the rules are finalized, so we've got a couple of iterations. Once they're finalized, her group will reach out and coordinate the schedules with the members. And
Perfect.
as you said, it can be done teleconference. They really make it flexible. And then they'll also be working on the criminal conviction stuff pretty quickly. So that'll be happening out the box. So the enforcement work group will be working very, very early. The licensing work group, probably not going to be a lot, probably over the next 6 or 9 months, because we don't see any changes necessarily to the qualifications of those individuals. Maybe an opportunity to talk about the rad tech changes that were precipitated by Senate Bill 674, but nothing major. The education examination work group will definitely be putting in some work. The subject matter expert elements that Ray touched on for the examination, those pieces will be included in there. And I think just getting the members familiar with how we do examinations here at TDLR and understand the mechanics, because the folks in your industry and in your profession are going to be asking, so did the exam change? I heard it changed, and you'll be able to have a little bit more understanding of it. And then obviously the standard of care group is going to have most of the elements that we said let's kick to that group. Licensing may have one or two, but as we talk about the sexual misconduct provisions, that's going to be the heavy wrestling that will take place with that. Each group will have a liaison with Dee for licensing, or Leonard will be coordinating that. Education and examination will be Ray or Kim Witt coordinating that. Enforcement, Christine's got her iron grip on that, so she doesn't play. And standard of care will be coordinated either by Hemet and Heather from the compliance group, so you can kind of see how our agency lines up with who will be working with you on this.
Perfect. All right, so that was agenda item H. Any further thing before we move on, by the way, on H? I, recommendations for agenda items for next board meeting, certainly the ones we heard today. The public comment from Mr. Hanna, we'll certainly put that on. We'll certainly need some more background information to, bring us up to where you are in understanding this, but absolutely seems reasonable. And then all of the things that will go to the work groups, whether it was temporary licensure and residency, the medical rad techs, the expiration after 3 years, and then the ethics things, all to be addressed through work groups. Anything else that we need to make sure is on the agenda item at this time? Certainly we can add it later. Nothing? Okay, that was I. J, discussion of date and time, location.
Mr. Chairman, we were looking at the calendar. We talked to Colleen with the comment publishing period. Anything in April, and it looks like we have the 16th. Well, first of all, for the members, does Monday work best for you? What's the best day of the week? Every day. Every day Saturday. I love it. I love it.
You might cramp as mall walking if you do that. Another day of the week.
Hey, Walmart gets pretty demanding these days when you're the greeter, so just
You got to bat the greeters
be
off.
light,
Come
be
in.
light on them. So, Mr. Chairman, if Monday works, then the 16th and 30th are available in
Okay.
April.
I'd prefer the 16th. Does anybody have a problem with the 16th? No. Okay.
And then, Mr. Chairman, the time, whatever works best for the members. We
So-
can do morning, we can do afternoon, whatever works best.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Number one, as a point of clarity, if you read in the things that we just went through, it does say something about reimbursement for travel, but the caveat to that is as by appropriation. So
Yes, sir.
there's no appropriation. So that should answer that question.
Yes, sir.
So I preface that because I got asked that a lot. So 10 o'clock, I think I live the furthest, and I can hoof it down here by 10 if I take off early driving, so that makes it easy. And if we stay efficient and everybody's prepared, obviously we can hit a fairly decent agenda in 2 hours. So other than North Austin traffic, I think 10 o'clock works okay with me. Is 10 okay for you, Dr. Lattimore? Dr. Martin? 10's fine. Perfect.
I'm local.
Outstanding.
Local. 10 it is. Does 10 work with you all, Mr. Francis?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We're here.
Okay. So April 16th, Monday, 10 o'clock. Anything else? Well, I'll leave some closing comments then, because I have the mic on in front of me. But, this is exciting. I know that's, personally, when we do these things, you get kind of beat up a little bit and attacked. Hemet knows that. Don knows it. We all know it. John gets beat up or used to get beat up in his job too. There's only a couple of things that I can ask of my crew and then working with y'all is that we continue doing. If this is just a glimpse under the hood, this is going to be pretty fantastic. So we get to not get beat up at conferences because y'all do your job, right? So things that you don't think sounds like a big deal, like lowering licenses, listen, if you're a Republican, it's a tax, but we'll call it a fee, right? So those are good things to get rid of. That's wonderful. There's a lot of movement of the needle in a very short amount of time. So the more y'all are continually able to improve our lives, trust me, that makes our lives a lot better. Because when you go to a meeting, we're the ones that take it. I can promise you, on a personal level. The only other thing, nobody even asked y'all to reduce those fees, and you did it. So if that was that easy, then the next task would be reduce my license fees. So if you want to take a crowd of angry mob and quiet them, take less money from them.
All right.
That makes everybody happy. So we'll put that on the horizon somewhere. But we're happy we're here. It's those of us that went through the sunset thing, and which is everyone sitting up here. You get a lot of personal attacks, and you try to tell people it's the right thing to do. I tell them it was like trying to run a freighter with like a little 5-horsepower outboard. We had the best 5-horsepower outboard there was, but now we got the full deal, so it's easy for us. So we're looking forward to it, and other than that, I'll save my soapbox until April 16th. We're adjourned.